Playing a GIF on a Python Tkinter GUI application is not that simple, but don't worry, in this video you're going to learn how to do that, and also we're going to write reusable code that you can use whenever you need to play one or more GIFs in your Python graphic user interfaces. By the way, before you get started, if you're here, I'm sure you want to become a programmer, and yes, here on YouTube you can learn a lot, but one of the best ways to actually improve, especially if you want to turn this into a career, is to take some courses made by experts in the field. Usually these courses are structured in a way that makes it easier for you to learn properly, and I've selected for you some of the best courses and learning platforms. You'll find the links in the description down below, and by using those links you're gonna help this channel as well. So first of all, let's import Tkinter as tk, then I'm gonna need time, and also from pil import image and image tk, like that. If you don't have pil installed and you get an error, you need to actually install it, so you can use pip install pillow, like that, or sometimes you need to use pip3 install pillow. I'm actually importing pil because the tk.photoimage doesn't support all the image files. For example, the GIF format is not supported, and neither are JPG files. I actually always use pil because I'm sure I won't have any problem with file compatibility and stuff like that. So I've decided to structure everything as a class, so if you need to add this to your own program, then it'll be easier because it's already structured correctly, and also we'll use instance variables instead of using global variables, which is always a good idea. If you don't know what I'm talking about, so instance variables, etc., I highly recommend you go and watch my series on classes, where I actually explain you all you need to know about them, so I'll leave the link in the description box down below. Let's start with the class. So my app, I'm gonna call it like that. I'm gonna inherit from the frame, then here self and root, and then I'm gonna call super. Basically here I'm overriding the init method of the frame, the tk frame, the frame class, like that. And I'm gonna do something like root, and then the background just white. Okay, then I'm gonna do something like self.main frame self, and basically here I've created an instance variable called main frame, and I've actually assigned self to it. So since we've inherited from the tk.frame class, self is actually a frame, the frame that will hold all the other widgets. And I could use self directly, but it could be confusing because if you do something like, I don't know, something like self pack, something like that, it's not clear straight away that this is the frame. But on the other hand, if you do something like self dot main frame, like that, dot pack, that is so much clearer that this is the main frame, right? So let's actually do something like fill, so tk both, like that, then expand true. Then I'm going to do something like main frame configure, like that, 0 weight 1. So this is needed to actually make the first column, which is the only one, stretchable. And then same thing but with the row, configure 0 weight 1, like that. Perfect. Now I'm going to actually create another method that will create all the widgets. Okay, in this case just a label and a few other things. So def create widgets, something like that. Of course you can call it however you want. So the label, so self label gif1. By the way, I'm calling it GIF, but sometimes I hear other people calling it GIF. Whatever, either of them is fine. So tk label, and I'm gonna do something like self.main frame. So here I've actually used an instance variable because if you need to access it from other methods, you need this to be an instance variable to actually be able to access it from other methods. So then background white, border 0, highlight thickness 0, like that. Then of course we need to do something like grid, otherwise we won't see anything on the screen, 0 like this. And of course now we need to call this up here, so we're going to do something like self.create widgets, otherwise this wouldn't be called and we wouldn't see the label. And of course down here we need to we need to actually create a root window. So tk like that. Then we can give it a title. This is not needed, but whatever, like that. Then we can do something like root, could be 600 by 600, a square like that. Then I don't want it resizable, so false and height false. And then of course I need to create an instance of my app. So my app instance is going to be my app, and then we're going to pass the root as the first argument. And then you know that we need to call the main loop, otherwise we won't see anything. A quick interruption here. I just want to mention that I now have a Patreon account where you can support me to keep creating content like this and also get exclusive perks. If you want to check that out, I'll leave the link in the description box down below, and thank you so much for the support. So let's actually try to run it, but we won't see anything because we just have a white label. But let's actually try to do that. As you can see, this is our application. Perfect. Now let's actually add a little button up here. And this is just to show you one thing later on. So self button, same thing. I'm going to use an instance variable because I might have to use it in a different method. So like that. Then the text is going to be simply button width 10, height 2, and then of course self button grid going to be column 0 row 1, like that. Let's try to run it now. So this is just a little button down here. This is just to show you one thing later on, so don't worry. So first of all, a GIF is sort of a collection of frames, basically images all packed together, and then the viewer shows them one after the other with a certain delay, of course, and they are sort of little videos, which they actually are to a certain extent, but unfortunately in Tkinter there is not a way to show them, and we need to do that manually. Okay, so now we can create another method that will actually get all the frames one by one and return a list of them. So I'm going to do that now here. So def, as you can see down here, we can do something like def like this, frames self, and then the image. Okay, as you can see, I'm using a private variable. Okay, so this means that this is a private variable, and I'm using it because I want this to be used only inside the class. In other methods, I discussed private variables in a video of the class series that I talked about earlier. As I said, the link is in the description box down below. So to get the frames, of course, we need to open the image. So we can do something like with image open like that, and of course image as GIF. Then we can do something like index 0 frames, an empty list like that. Then we don't actually know how many frames we have, so we're going to use a while true loop, and we'll break out of it once we have all the frames. So while true try, I'm going to do something like GIF seek index. So basically this loads a frame of the GIF that is specified by the index. So for example, in this case, the first frame at index 0, then the second frame at index 1, and so on and so forth. And then we need to create a photo image from every single frame. Okay, and we can do this by doing something like frame. It's going to be image tk photo image like that, and then the GIF. Okay, and then frames append frame like that. So when you do something like this GIF here represents the first frame. Then the second loop, this will be 1. So basically this file here is going to be the second frame. And when you create an image from that, you create an image from the second frame, and so on and so forth. Basically that is what happens. Then we can do something like except EOF error. And this is basically the error that we'll get once we don't have any more frames. And we're using this to tell us that we got through all of them, okay, without knowing the actual number of frames beforehand. And of course, we can break out of the loop like that. And lastly, of course, if we don't get any error, it means that we still have frames, so we can increase the index by 1 to get to the next frame. So 1, like that. And after the loop, so here, we can do something like return frames. So basically this goes through the whole GIF frame by frame. It puts all the frames into a list of frames and then it returns it. Perfect. So now we can actually call this function up above in the init method right under the GIF1 label. So we can do something like GIF1 label. So here you can do something like self GIF1 frames. And basically here, although we are actually using this variable just inside the create widgets method, we are using an instance variable because the list that we are going to get from getFrames is going to contain image objects, basically. And if the list gets garbage collected, then all the references to the images are sort of lost, and this could cause the images to not show up. I've actually made a video where I explain this in detail, so if you want to check that out, I'll leave the link in the description box down below as well. So, as I said, we are going to do something like self, and then get frames, and then 1. And this, of course, is an image that I have here. So I've got image 1 and image 2. Okay, so let's now actually print the list like that. So for frame in self, GIF1 frames, print frame like that. Let's try to run it and see what we get. As you can see, let's actually close it. As you can see, you get all these image objects, so 72, which means that you've got 72 frames. And as you could see, the time taken to go through all the frames sort of delayed everything, and the window didn't actually open straight away, because Python needed to go through all the frames before actually starting the main loop down below, and this caused that delay, basically. Now we can actually load one frame as the image of the actual label, so you can actually see what I'm talking about, and I'm doing this just to show you, okay? So let's delete this one first, okay? Now we can do something like self label GIF1 config like this, and then image, and we can use self.gif1 frames. Let's see what we get. So you can see this is the frame. As you can see, the birds up here. Now though comes the tricky part, because how can we actually make this GIF alive? By the way, I haven't mentioned that this method doesn't work with GIFs that have a transparent background, and this is a well-known limitation of Pill that doesn't handle that kind of GIFs properly. To my knowledge, they haven't really fixed it yet, and all the workarounds are pretty complex because they deal with the pixels of the image, etc., and they don't always work, so keep that in mind, okay? In this case, I'm not using GIFs with a transparent background, okay? So now you might think that we just need to loop through the list of frames with a little delay and we'll get the animation going, right? So let's actually delete this and try to do that. So to do that, we're going to create a method called playGIF, and we're going to do this down here. So after the get frames, we're going to do something like def private variable GIF. So I'm gonna have self label frames, okay, the parameters, and I've added these parameters because it's not a good idea to hard code a certain label name or a certain list, okay? As I'll show you later on, if you have more than one GIF, you can use the same method and each one will update the right label using the right frames, etc. So I hope that makes sense. As I said, you might think that we just need to do something like for frame in frames and then label config and then image frame, and then maybe down here a little delay. So let's say 0.05 like that. So now that we've got this method, we can just go up here and call it under the GIF1 frames variable. So self.playGIF. The first parameter is going to be the label. So label GIF1 and then self.GIF1 frames like this. So let's actually try to run it and see what we get. So let's see. Nothing is showing up. Oh, and we get this thing here, but it doesn't actually work. You don't see the birds here flying or whatever. So basically, when you create an instance of the app, Python calls init, okay, and also this method here. So this one here and this one here. it goes through all the frames, but the Tkinter main loop hasn't actually started yet, which means that you don't even see the window and the label has already the last frame as the image. So we need to run the play GIF after a little delay to let Tkinter create at least the window and all the widgets. And of course, we need to find the right delay. So instead of actually calling this directly like that, we can do something like root after 100 milliseconds. So after 100 milliseconds, play GIF and then self label GIF1 and then self GIF1 frames like this. And let's actually comment this out because we don't need that. So with after, the first argument is the delay, then you've got the actual function to call, then the two arguments, okay? And by doing this, we're basically scheduling an event that runs that function after 100 milliseconds, and this doesn't block the whole code. So the window is created, and after 100 milliseconds, the play GIF function is called as well. So now it should work, right? Let's actually see. So let's see what we get. So the window shows up straight away. But as you can see, it still doesn't work. But why? We're just still seeing the last frame. So basically, when you loop like this here, Tkinter doesn't have the time to update the screen because it wants the task at hand to finish. In this case, the for loop in the play GIF method. And then after the for loop has ended, it goes and updates the screen. So basically you only see the last frame. And of course, the actual interface is sort of blocked. So if you rerun it and we try to click the button, as you can see, it doesn't work. And then it starts working again. Okay. So you might be wondering, okay, Fabio, but how can I fix it? So instead of using the time.sleep that blocks the thread completely, blocking also the screen updates and the whole interface, we can schedule different calls to a new method, and each call will be scheduled a little after the previous one. And since we're scheduling events and not using time.sleep, between these scheduled, let's say, updates, Tkinter has the time to refresh the screen, show the new frame, and also the interface is not completely blocked. And you can still click buttons and stuff like that, okay? But this is just the theory. I'm sure everything will be even clearer after we implement it. So first of all, we need to create a new method, and I'm going to call it next frame, like this. Self frame label. This is the frame to render, and this is the label where we actually want the frame to be rendered in. And we can do something like label config frame like that. And of course, this is just a simple method that doesn't do a lot. And of course, we need to change the play GIF method as well. So first of all, I'm going to add up here a total delay, and we want to start with a small delay. So total delay 50, which are milliseconds. And then here we can add delay frames 100, and this is basically the time between one frame and the other. And of course, this gives also the speed of the animation. So the smaller the delay, the faster the animation. Then we can go through the frames, but let's actually remove this thing here. Okay, so for framing frames, for each frame, we want to schedule a call to the method next frame above, passing the new frame and the label in which we want this image to show up, basically. So root. Gonna use root after that total delay self next frame, then the first is going to be frame and then label like that. And of course, then we need to add the delay between frames to the total delay. So we can do something like total delay plus equal delay frames like that. So basically, I added the initial delay up here, the 50 milliseconds, just as a little precaution, because Python needs to go through all the frames and schedule all the calls to next frame before it can actually update the screen, okay? It's probably not needed because looping 72 times is incredibly fast that you wouldn't even notice it, but you don't even notice 50 milliseconds of delay, so why not? So let's recap what happens here. So when you create the app instance, you get the frames of the GIF using getFrames. Then you call play GIF with a label where you want the GIF to show up and the frames of the GIF, of course. When you call this method, you go through all the frames one by one and schedule a call to next frame, which is just a simple method to change the image of the label, nothing more. the delay of the scheduled calls is cumulative, which means that the first call to next frame is scheduled after the 50 milliseconds, so the initial delay. So you will see the first frame after 50 milliseconds. The next call to next frame to show the second frame is scheduled after 150, which is the initial value, the initial delay plus delay frames. So 50 plus 100. Then the next call is going to be 150 plus 100. So after 250 milliseconds, then after 350, 450, and so on and so forth. So this loop here is just needed to schedule all the calls that will be executed by Tkinter at the right time in the future. So for example, the last call with the last frame will be shown after around 7,150 milliseconds, if I'm not mistaken, because we have 72 frames. Okay, let's actually try to run it. So as you can see, everything is working. The birds up here, all the things here, so everything is working. And also, if we rerun it, we can see that the animation is going, but we can still click the button properly. Of course, if when we click the button we run a task that takes time, then the whole interface will be blocked and the animation stopped. In that case, if we want the GIF to keep running and the interface to be responsive, then we need to use multi-threading and run different threads. In the future, I'll publish a video on how to use multi-threading to create a loading screen using a GIF while the program loads something else or does some processing on another thread. When it comes out, I'll leave the link in the cards up above and in the description box down below. So this is quite good. The only problem though is that after one cycle the animation stops, and we don't want that. We want actually the animation to keep going, to keep running, and let's actually have a look at how we can actually do that. By the way, if you're finding the video helpful, click that like button to show me your support. Also, if you want to become a better programmer, subscribe to the channel as well. Now, as I said, we want to change things so that the GIF keeps running and running. And to do that, we need a way to tell Tkinter that we've just rendered the last frame and we want to start from the first one again, okay? So to do that, we're going to add another parameter to the next frame down here, and we're going to call it frames, like this, which will be basically the list of frames, and also another parameter called restart, like that, with the default value false. Then, if restart is true, so that means that we've already shown the last frame, so we need to call play GIF again so that the new loop starts, and we can just use a small delay because we want it to run straight away. Okay, so we can do something like root after self play GIF label, like that. We could probably call self play GIF straight away without using after, but just to make sure everything works as expected, I'm gonna use after. And then we need to return like this. Why? Because basically the last frame has already been rendered, the previous call, and we don't want to run it twice. We don't want to show it twice, basically. Of course, we need to change the play GIF up here a little bit as well. So of course here we need to actually add frames, okay, because of course we've added down here another parameter, so we're passing this here. Then down here, after the loop, when all the events for the frames have been scheduled, we can then schedule a call to next frame, but in this case with restart true. Let's actually copy this down here, like that, and of course we can use true like that. So in this case, play GIF is called again, and then a new cycle starts. But let's see if that actually works. Let's see. So first cycle, birds here. Let's see if we see them again. As you can see, there you go. This is the second cycle. The button is clickable. Okay, so everything is working as expected. But as I said earlier, this actually should work with more than one GIF because we've made it so that we can actually use the same exact method for all the GIFs. Even if you have 100 GIFs, this should work. And let's actually try to do that. So first of all, we need to go up here, and I'm going to add something like self mainframe row configure 1 wait 1, And I've actually added this because the GIFs are actually a little too big and I want them to sort of shrink a little, but don't worry about it. Down here, we can add another GIF. We can actually do something like this. So same exact thing. Let's fix all the indentation like that. So this is going to be GIF 2, same thing. I just want to show you. So this is going to be image 2 like this. We don't need this like that. Here, GIF 2, 2. Everything should be fine if I changed everything correctly. So as you can see, since we've created methods without hard coding anything like the label name, the GIF name, etc., we can use the same exact thing for all the GIFs. Isn't that cool? Let's actually make the window a little bit taller. So down here, we can do something like 1000 like that. Perfect. Actually, I forgot to change up here row 1, which is basically the second row. And the button, I want the button to be on row 2, like that. Perfect. Let's try to run it and see what we've got. As you can see, this is working because you see everything down here. This is working as well. You can click the button without any kind of problem. And this is working as expected. So really, really nice. Really, really nice. Perfect. So on the screen right now, you should see another really interesting video about Python and Tkinter, so I highly recommend you go and check that out. Don't forget to check out my Patreon. Also, if you haven't already, please like the video, and also if you want to become a better programmer, subscribe to the channel as well, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!